Is there enough anxiety from an individual, a teen or a child, that we should begin seeking some sort of answer and some sort of treatment? This seems to be one of the biggest questions there is.
Yeah, it's a hard question because anxiety is a part of life. It's not an appropriate goal to rid ourselves of all anxiety. We all have to live with worries and anxieties from time to time. So there's certain good skills that I think one could get from my book and other books as well to help people cope with the typical and daily anxieties of just being alive. Now, if there is a tremendous interference with functioning. A youngster can't go to school anymore. They're not able to be with their friends. They're not able to interact with people. If there really is some interference with functioning, then it might make sense that beyond what a parent is trying to do on their own, they might want to seek professional help and go see a therapist and go get some treatment and maybe even a consult with a psychiatrist potentially. So but a lot of what we're talking about in the book are things that people can do day to day just to cope with maybe what we would call more normal anxiety, more sort of day-to-day anxiety.
Yeah, I think this book is a must for everybody on their bookshelf. We should mention it isn't out yet. It's coming out at the beginning of August from Future Horizons. And you can get that book. I think you can pre-order it, www.fhautism.com. And again, it's called Overcoming Anxiety in Children and Teens. I've had an opportunity to spend some time with the book this last week, and it's just, I think, an amazing, amazing piece of work. Somebody this week referred to it as a masterpiece, and I don't think that they overstated it. It's really comprehensive and so well written for those of us who don't have degrees in psychology, Dr. Baker. I think you did a great job of making it so that we can all access it easily.
Well, you're very kind to say. I mean, there are lots of really good books out there that sort of tell us the science of treatment of anxiety, but there are not always a lot of books that say, well, then how do you win people over to do what we know works? We know gradual exposure, gradually facing fears works. That's cognitive behavioral treatment of anxiety. But how do you get people to do that? What do you say to kids? How do you win them over? That's the trick. That's the art of therapy. So we try to address that in the book.
Yeah, and you've got great features in the book, that you've got scripts that you show us. You use examples of kids that you've had interactions with. We're going to talk about what a fear ladder is and what the reward ladder alongside of it is. But really great graphics that help us to get to the nuts and bolts of what we have to do. So how do we win somebody over to be able to do that exposure that you were talking about for cognitive behavioral therapy? How do we win them over? And talk a little bit about those fear ladders.
Yeah, well, most of the kids that I see, say, who are high-functioning kids, are not necessarily coming in because they want therapy. They're coming in because their parents want them to have therapy. So I might start with someone who's not so on board with the idea of getting help or seeing their anxiety symptoms as getting in the way, even if it's taking them 5 hours of sort of an OCD ritual before they can go to school. The parents see that as a problem. The child may not. So the first step with most of my clients, regardless of diagnosis often, is to talk about their strengths and their abilities and sort of an optimistic future, what they can do with their lives with their strengths and their talents. And from that position, it's a little easier to digest and talk about maybe some challenges like anxiety symptoms that might get in the way of reaching their goals. So if we start from a really positive place, that the child isn't damaged, there isn't something wrong, there's a lot right about that kid, then I think it's easier to talk about, well, we just don't want those challenges to get in the way. And challenges are not things necessarily you have to overcome. You don't get rid of all anxiety. You just have to get it to a point where it's not in the way anymore, right? So that's one way to start. The other way is to really educate our clients, kids and adults, about anxiety, about their alarm response, their limbic system, and that sometimes we have true alarms, but sometimes we have false alarms. So if a car is coming to hit you, that's a true alarm. You have to get out of there. It's great that you have this alarm system that says, danger, danger, get out of there. But sometimes we have false alarms. We're afraid to talk to people who are really kind and will treat us nicely. We're afraid to maybe go to certain places that really are not dangerous and quite safe. We're afraid to touch things because we might get a germ that but there really is no danger. We're not going to die from that germ. So these are false alarms. So I think part of the beginning of treatment is winning people over to the idea that part of their brain might sometimes not tell them the truth. There might be an alarm system that goes off. They have real symptoms, but the out there danger isn't necessarily, a real danger. And then the issue is, how do you get people to then slowly confront those fears? And that's what a fear ladder is. Most people, can't necessarily face their biggest fear. So you have to break it down. If I have a youngster who, say, is selectively mute, they can talk, but they're afraid to talk to their kindergarten teacher. We're not going to start out by asking them to talk. We start out with little steps, maybe just indicating yes or no on a piece of paper, a check mark, or nodding yes or no. Maybe when whispering to a friend who can talk to the teacher for them. And then the next rung on the ladder might be whispering to the teacher. And then the next rung on the ladder would be talking in an inside normal voice to the teacher, and so on. And each step of the ladder, the child really gets to decide, are they ready to confront that step? Are they ready to try to face that fear? And then we would offer perhaps an incentive for young kids and kids with less language. They might need an external reward, like they're going to earn a snack or iPad time or some other privilege to face that rung on the ladder. For really high functioning teens and adults, they may not need an external reward. They may just, the intrinsic reward of feeling pride that they successfully confronted their fear may be enough. So that's the fear ladder, and we do things like some cognitive behavioral techniques. We call it think like a scientist. We've developed these think like a scientist cue cards to help challenge some of the worrisome thoughts, so that kids and teens can begin to confront their fearful situations. So there's lots of ways to think about confronting worrisome thoughts, but there's just two things that I focus on to simplify all that cognitive behavioral work for kids. And those two things are overestimating how likely it is that something bad will happen, and then overestimating how bad it would happen, how bad it would be if it did happen. So for example, for me, I fly a lot for work. And over the years, with things that have happened in the news, I've had a little plane phobia. But if I think like a scientist and get the statistics, it's pretty clear the chances of me dying in a plane crash are about 1 in 7.8 million for most of all the major airlines. But I only fly the safest 38 major airlines. Chances of going down on one of those is 1 in 19.8 million. So I'm just, if I think like a scientist, I'm not going to die in a plane crash. It's not the way I'm going to go, And so we create these little cue cards for kids to try to face their anxieties.